Good morning. Let's start our session then. So like I said, my name's Rebecca Robinson. I'm from the Lancashire Cyber Foundry. Welcome to one of our engagement events. So we're really looking forward to hosting this today, all around how you can pivot your business. Just a couple of housekeeping. I've already mentioned, please keep your cameras on if you can and your microphones off. If you've got any questions, and I'm sure you'll have lots of burning questions at times, please don't use the chat function to send to everyone. If you can send it directly to Mark Murray's on there. If you can send it to him, that would be great. I don't need to talk about fire drills because you're all at home and I've got no idea if you've got any planned fire drills in your own houses. Obviously, we're here at the moment. We're actually in our building. That's in the Info Lab at Lancaster University. The Lancashire Cyber Foundry is here to support SMEs across Lancashire. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of today's session. If you have any questions around that, however, please get in touch with myself. We've got the Lancashire Cyber Foundry, which is the Cyber Foundry at lancaster.ac.uk as an email address. I'm going to introduce the panel to you now. So we've got two people here in person and we've got one person online, and I'm going to hand over individually to each. So Colin, would you like to go first?
Good morning everyone, I'm Colin Mclaughlin. I'm the Technology Transfer Manager for the School of Computing and Communications, and I'm here today to help discuss how people can pivot their business and possibly make some suggestions about next steps and actions you can take to help do that.
Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris Dixon. I work as Head of IT Partnering and Innovation at the university. I also run my own audiovisual business, and I also coach business leaders and people in business on various subjects, including how to pivot and respond to change, which is a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today.
And on Zoom, we've got Damien.
Hello, I'm Damian Gelder of Q2Q. I'm officially an IT consultant and the head of support. I'm usually going out seeing people doing IT audits and showing them how they can make better changes and save money.
Thanks, everyone. Just a quick heads up, we will be recording this session. We won't be putting anything onto any social media or anything like that at this stage. It's just there for our evidence for our funding body. So it's all treated confidentially unless we message you afterwards to let you know. Okay, so we're going to start this session by Chris going to give us a talk all about pivoting businesses. Like I said, feel free to message Mark Murray with any questions you've got at any time during this talk, and I'll hand over to you now.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to start with problems, and I'm going to start with this pair of boots here. And this is a story about when I first started one of my roles at the university, which was managing a whole team of IT technicians. I was very new in my role, and the previous person had booked an away day for all of the technicians to come to. So I was in my kind of new managerial role, not wanting to sort of get involved too much, kind of sit back and relax. And we had this session where they were all asked to note down something that they really thought had gone really well in the last year. So we had 10 minutes, flip chart paper and things like that. And as that went on, I became sort of filled with a glowing sense of doom, and the only thing that they were able to feed back at the end of the session that had happened positive in the last 12 months was that all of the technicians had received a new pair of safety boots. And that taught me two things. The first thing was that we might have a bit of a culture problem here to address, and indeed we did. And the second thing was that I would make sure that every single year I brought them a brand new pair of boots. In fact, we also introduced over trousers and various other workwear as well. So this is the first problem that I kind of see when I work with people, is that people and cultures have this tendency to kind of focus in on the past, and that's something that stops people adapting and changing. So if you don't remember anything else, just remember the boots. Now, second story, this is not my story. Someone, in fact, a professor from a university in London told me this story at a conference, but I love it so much, and I hope if you've not heard it before, it'll be really good. So this represents a sign-in book. And what happened is this professor was involved in innovation in the NHS and was told to go into the NHS and kind of look into how they could pivot and how they could change. And obviously the NHS is probably undergoing quite a lot of change. And they're a very healthy person, and they decided in London they were going to cycle in. So they got the bike, cycled in. And when they got there at the reception, they said, would you mind just signing in the bicycle book? And this lady said, yeah, no problem. Signed in the book, date, name, bit of information. Delivered their session. And then this lady got to thinking, well, that's interesting. You know, I'm here to look at processes in the NHS. Let's follow the bicycle book process and kind of see what happens. So said to the receptionist, you know, what do you know anything about this bicycle book? No, don't know anything about the bicycle book. We just get people to sign it. Do you know what happens to the bicycle books when they get full? Because there was quite a lot of signatures. Yeah, they go to HR. So the lady goes to HR, big room, says, bicycle books, you know, what's the story with the bicycle books? Ah, yes. Well, we get the bicycle books for reception and we put them on this shelf. Okay. What happens when the shelf gets full? Well, what we do then is we've got big photocopying boxes and we stack all of the books into the photocopying boxes because they fit, you know, quite nicely in a photocopying box. Okay, great. And what happens when the boxes get full? Said, right, well, what we do then is we take them down to our storeroom and they get stored for archiving because we have to keep the records. Okay, do you want to take me down to the archive store? So I went down to the archive store, opened the door, room, floor to ceiling, full of photocopying boxes. Now, it turns out that what had actually happened is the NHS was founded around kind of 1948, and at that time there was food rationing, and the rule was if you had a bicycle, you were able to get extra food rations. So they'd introduced this process of signing the bicycle book. But when the food rationing system had stopped, no one had ever questioned this. And in all the years from 1948 to when this lady came, they were just collecting these bicycle books for absolutely no reason, with all of these huge kind of storage behind it. Absolutely bonkers. And when I heard this at the conference, the challenge to us as kind of business leaders was go back and find the bicycle book in your organisation. The thing that you're doing that you don't need to do, that you've just done forever and ever. And that really kind of spoke to me. And in my work at the university and in other things, I could find plenty of bicycle books. So if you don't remember anything else, you can remember the bicycle book, and that's your challenge to go away and look for it. And that to me is kind of the second problem that stops people pivoting in their business. And that's kind of accepting the norms that have gone on for ages and not, you know, challenging those. So that's, you know, two of the problems. People and cultures focusing on the past and people accepting the norms and not challenging. So they're the problems. You know, how do we sort of approach the solutions to that? I think one of the things is being able to change culture and move to a culture that's more about innovation and change and move to one that's focused and excited about the future. And I think the other thing we have as part of the solution is being able to pivot rapidly and kind of make rapid changes. And I guess in our minds, we've got the COVID pandemic, which we're very much not out of yet, and has caused huge change to business. And I'm sure in the questions, that's going to be something that we're going to come back to today. So in many ways, the pandemic has actually forced this change on some businesses. And I think there's lots of positive stories that have come out where people have actually had to make changes that they either would have made over a longer time period, and people have readapted. Just to give you a couple of stats that I pulled up, these are from McKinsey quite recently. So, you know, 90% of business leaders believe that COVID-19 will fundamentally change the way that they do business over the next 5 years. 85% convinced that it will have a lasting impact on their customers' needs and wants over the next 5 years. So COVID has introduced kind of massive change. And I'm sure, you know, if you think now, you can think of businesses that have actually done really well. You know, I'm thinking of online fitness. I've been very tempted to get a Peloton machine, but they are doing rather well. In fact, they've seen, you know, 200% growth in their fitness business. Online conferencing, if you'd have known, I think we'd have all been buying shares in Zoom, wouldn't we? Because they've done rather well. Grocery delivery, that's also sort of nearly 400% up. So these businesses have done really, really well. And I can think of examples from my own experience as well. So the university had a project to roll out Microsoft Teams, the online platform. That was originally scoped with quite a few project managers and a large budget, taking many years, and that project was delivered almost overnight because we had to flick the switch. And I think that asks some interesting questions about how much faff and project management we sometimes need, doesn't it? But I'm going to give you a less obvious example that I found, and I've got another prop for this. So here's my pasty. It's actually a Greg's pasty, but the company I wanted to talk about is actually a business based in Bolton. It's called Cars Pasties, and they're not an online fitness business, that's had that growth because of the pandemic. In fact, they had some real challenges. So that's a business that was established in 1938. It's a family-run business. The director board is a bunch of brothers. They're a reasonably big company, turning over, just north of £4 million a year. And they make these wonderful Lancashire pasties. If people think of pasties, they sometimes think of Cornish pasties, but these are the proper pasties, more filling. Very nice. So they make meat and potato pasties. And their model was based on resale shops. In Bolton, they had 3 shops. They sold to kind of spas and garage forecourts and things like that. And on the day that lockdown was announced, they had to send home 100 of their staff. So that's people making the pies and pasties and things like that. Sent them home and put them on furlough. And when it became clear that the shops, weren't going to open for a while, there was a real risk that this business that had been going since 1938, was going to end, because there was no way for them to actually get their products out. They couldn't socially distance in the factory because it was too full of machines. The shops weren't going to open, and some of the shops were small. What are they going to do? Well, what they actually did was kind of radically rethink and redesign the business. So they took an axe to their pie machine, which was taking up loads of space in the factory, threw it out, stopped that part of the line. They brought in a new marketing team, and they decided that they were going to offer a new nationwide frozen pasties delivery service, which is very good, although I'm not sponsored by them. And over 8 months, they completely transformed the way that they did business, new marketing, new website, new processes to allow them to deliver, a new kind of clearer vision, and they were actually able to keep a lot of their staff. And now the future is bright. It looks like turnover is going up, and they're going to emerge from the pandemic, stronger and better than when they started, from an unlikely kind of source, a business that you wouldn't necessarily think would be pivoting in COVID times. So I put my pasty down there. And I'm sure we could get into other examples of businesses and perhaps more questions that you might have about, how to achieve that kind of pivoting. But I just want to kind of leave you with 3 things which might be very practical ways that you can start to think about how you can change the culture so that you can start to pivot and make more rapid change. I'm sure there's more than 3, but these are 3 that I kind of picked out that you can take away. So the first one is to have a way to be able to generate ideas, which sounds on the surface quite a simple thing. But many businesses don't actually have a way for people who have real deep knowledge of the business to actually suggest ideas and get them done. Examples of this. So, Amazon is a huge big company. They're known for having a really simple process called the press release, where anyone at any level in the organisation can write a simple 1 or 2 page script. They can take it to their line manager. They can get it looked at, they can get it developed, they can form a team around it, and they can have ideas. And that's one of the things that Amazon say allows them to have such rapid growth and be able to respond to change in such a way. Other practical ways you can do it. Ideas walls to allow employees to post ideas, to collaborate on them, to kind of discuss them, to vote on them, to see what rises to the top. Challenge competitions where you set a business challenge and say, look, we want your help in solving them. And indeed, at the university, we have a challenge platform. We've run challenges around how can we work from home better, how can we do hybrid working, how can we reach out to our international communities. So these are all things you can do. And even if you don't have the skills and capability to do any of them, a good old-fashioned suggestion box, to me, counts as a place where people can have ideas. I think the one thing you've got to be careful of is making sure that isn't the place where ideas kind of go to die, that you do feed back to people and you do kind of take notice of what they say. So that's the first one. Make sure you've got a way to generate ideas. The second one is to try and feed the good bits of the culture One of my favourite films is a Disney film called Tomorrowland, and it has a little sort of Indian parable in it. There are two wolves who are always fighting. One is darkness and despair, the other is light and hope. The question is, which wolf wins? And the answer to the parable is the one you feed. And, you know, when we think about culture in organisations, I think there's something about feeding and stoking that positive culture. And for me, that's about telling the stories of positivity. You know, when you have a customer that you've really helped, when something's gone really well, you need to overtell that story and kind of feed that back to your staff. And it's through retelling those positive stories and being positive that we can encourage that culture of innovation and change and positivity. So that's the second one, feed the good bits of the culture. And my last one is my glass of water that's been on the table. And this is an old one, but, you know, learn to see the glass half full. You know, during COVID, it's so easy to focus on all of the problems and all of the things that have gone wrong. And in fact, many staff, you know, we find are in difficult situations with genuine kind of real problems. But I think as leaders and as people in the business, we've got to see the glass half full, and we've got to be positive. There's another phrase that I really like, which is, we cannot be what we cannot see. And that kind of speaks that as someone who's a leader or a coach or someone working in a business, we've got to be that role model that even in the depths of the dark in COVID times, we have that kind of strong sense of vision, and we are that role model for people to see. So yes, there's problems in people, in culture. There's the bicycle book and the norms that we have. But I think if we remain positive and we try and do those simple things to allow people to generate ideas and promote a positive culture, then that's how we can start to kind of pivot and change in our business.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. That was really, really good. Really, really interesting. We've had some questions, and actually some of it's to do with what you were just discussing there, which I guess is to do with attitudes and culture. And the question is, what's the most common behavioural traits that you've seen within organisations that struggle to adapt and change?
Good question. You're giving that to me, are you?
Go on, Chris. I'll give it to you first of all.
Yeah, sure. Let me think. Behavioural traits. Yeah, well, I think one of the most common behavioural traits is people who just don't communicate, or a lack of communication. So between people, especially within teams. So I'll give you an example. I've recently started managing a development team, and even in COVID times, you know, on the calls that we had, on the Zoom calls, the Teams calls, we would have a lot of kind of camera off, people with mics muted. You know, you'd ask a question seeking for engagement, and it'd be like that kind of tumbleweed in the film, and that awkward, embarrassing kind of silence. And sometimes that builds up in a culture over time. So that's definitely a behaviour. How do you go about changing that behaviour? It's very difficult. It's kind of that culture change piece again. Some of the things I mentioned, you know, being radically kind of positive and refusing to let that get you down, I think is something. And I think also working with people individually. I'm always a believer that as a manager or as a leader, you've got to invest time with, you know, the people who you work with in your business. You know, you should be seeing them one-to-one, you know, regularly, and not just on the operational side of things. You know, how many pasties have you made today? You know, do we need a new pie machine? It's really kind of caring for people and saying, you know, how are you doing in COVID? Addressing those behaviours. You know, I've noticed you've got your camera off. I've noticed you're not saying much. Why is it? And through exploring and asking those why questions, then you can kind of start to break down that culture and see a change, I guess.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually, doesn't it? One of the another questions that I'm gonna just put out to all three of you actually on the panel. It's a very good question. I like this question. When does Agile become rudderless? So I guess they're saying, you know, you can make so many changes and so many things happening that you then don't have direction, you don't have focus. So I don't know who wants to take that. Colin, do you want to have?
Yeah, I'll take a punt first.
Yeah.
And you probably come up with 3 different conflicting answers as well, which would be really interesting. I mean, to me, I think part of the challenge is always, Chris has talked about that leadership and that management style. That's where that important management piece is. It's having a clear organisational vision, and the agility is there to enable you to reach that goal. So where Chris is talking about, idea generation, you should have that clarity to start off with about that communal direction of travel. So where are you looking to go? How do you get there? And the agility is part of that roadmap that allows you to change what you're looking to do, seek advice and guidance where you need it, and implement new working practices to cope with the sort of changing situation. So obviously, as we mentioned here with the pandemic, everyone's changed to a whole new set of online and remote processes. And now as we start to come back from that, are those processes the perfect processes for your business, or are you now going to sort of need to revisit that and start looking at how you're going to move forward together as things go back to, I guess, what everyone describes as the new normal?
Yeah. Damien, do you want to add to that?
Yes. So what I would say is agility is absolutely fantastic in this day and age, because the world can change dramatically so quickly. But it needs, as Colin says, focus. You need to know what changes you're making are working. Usually within a business, the culture becomes happier. You can see them engage in it. You can see it's working in the same way that you can when you introduce changing behaviours at home with kids, and particularly over the last 2 months. If your kids are happy, and I think any great leader should know that about their employees. And I think I think you need that focus and you need that feedback from them.
Yeah, that's really good. I've got a direct question for you, Chris. He said that the case studies were really interesting examples of how businesses have managed to pivot. Where do you find these cases, and how would you look for more so that they can gain inspiration and ideas as to how to pivot?
Yeah, good question. I suppose personally a lot of that comes from talking to people. I don't know anyone at Cars Pasties. The Cars Pasties one is because I kind of listen to kind of business podcasts. So, the BBC Bottom Line is a really good one that I listen to, and I actually found that story on there and then dug into it a bit more. I guess networking events, like we have here, are really, really good places. I think if you're just on your own, that's a really hard place to be. If you're working and connecting with other businesses, then that's when you're going to get stories, and especially things from outside your industry as well. So, as someone that works in higher education, I've got a number of networks that are outside that. So I think, finding some time and space to keep well read, keep up to date, listen to the podcasts, read the articles, that's where you're going to get some stuff. And then making sure you've got kind of good, strong networks, including those outside your organisations, are all good ways to kind of see what's going on and get those kind of case studies, I'd say.
Yeah, some good top tips there. There's an observation, really, rather than a question, but I think it's probably worth pointing out that somebody said, talking about the bicycle book example that you mentioned, and obviously when noticing that this procedure was continuing to happen and it didn't need to happen, they're suggesting that perhaps that sometimes when we do this and we remove these processes, we miss opportunities where we can extract value. They're saying that there's 7 decades worth of data on cycling to work, and actually maybe it was an opportunity to look at additional information, what value can be gathered from there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I love that. I don't know that they didn't sort of digitise and use all the data. They may well have done. I think that's good. I think that is good. We do have to be careful when we're removing processes. We can't just run roughshod through the organisation as much as some of us might like to. I'm a big fan of removing faff, and I'm sure that given the chance, I would remove useful things when I perhaps shouldn't. I think that's about having a sense of balance on our teams, so that for people that are going to be non-faffing and jump through like me, you've got people who are a bit more sort of calm and careful. But I do think there are examples, and you can always find them if you look hard enough, of process that we just don't need. And it might not be a whole process. It could be something that's just overly complicated. I don't know if I invented the word complexification, but for me, I just come across complexification, all the time. This tendency to make things unnecessarily complicated because we want data, or because I don't really know why.
Final question then that's come through, which is what do you think is more important, the business owner or the staff when it comes to pivoting? So I think they're picking up on the idea that we're having these ideas, these touch points where staff make suggestions and recommendations, and obviously the business owners perhaps drive may conflict. Does anyone want to take that?
I mean, I'll start. That is a very, very good question. I'm going to say, and you won't like this answer, I think they're equally important, and I think we've touched on some of them. I think you have to enable your staff, because they're the people, I can't possibly know everything about how to run whatever it is that I'm running. So it's super important that they're empowered to be able to make change and suggest ideas and do all of those good things. So they're important. But without a strong sense of vision and direction, that's going to be unhelpful. So you've kind of got to have both of them. So it's, I don't think you like the answer, but I think they're both equally important.
No. I was going to echo that and say it's all about balance and trust. Because at the end of the day, the business manager owner has got to make those hard decisions about the direction of travel, and ultimately they've probably got quite a lot of their sort of personal finance tied up in that organisation. So realistically they don't want to make the wrong call, and so you often see a bit of sort of hesitancy, because it can be a big decision, but obviously you want your staff to be on board with you for that journey. And I think that the pivot that everyone's made to sort of working remotely and doing things differently has enabled, I think, more trust. Because one of the things I've always seen with working with SMEs is it's quite difficult for people to let go, especially as their organisation grows. Whereas at one stage the owner manager will probably know absolutely everything that's going on. They created all the processes, they've brought people in, but as those teams grow, they've got to be able to sort of step back away from that. And that's obviously one of the hardest points for any organisation, is that sort of letting go of the reins and trusting the people beneath you to take the business forward with the shared vision that you've got. And so, I think, as Chris said, it's absolutely about balance. Yeah.
Damien, do you want to disagree with them, or?
No, I would agree entirely. So, for example, our business runs with RMD Lorna Stalakis. She is not a techie at all. She relies and trusts on us completely to give that feedback of what elements of her vision and direction are working or not working. Then she obviously goes back up and changes the rudder, sets the ship in the right direction, and everybody cracks on again. And I think for everyone to operate, it's so important that everyone's feedback is just as important as everyone else's. Everyone's in it together. Yeah. I think any business leader who thinks, unless they've been there and done all the little jobs that is going to make that ship sail in the right direction, I don't think they have the right feedback or knowledge to get the ship there, even though they know where they're going.
No, that makes sense. That's great. That wraps up all of our questions. Obviously, feel free to add some more and send them to Mark directly, but we'll move on to the next section of today's session. We've got some example companies that we would like our panel to talk through about ways of which they could pivot. Feel free to put your own businesses into the chat function directly to Mark. We just want some very, very basic information from you if you are going to do that. So your company name, type, and perhaps where you see the future of your business going in 5-10 years' time, something like that. That would be really helpful. But we'll start with one company that I've got already for you guys as an example. So this company is a face-to-face training company. They're a health and safety training company with 3 members of staff, predominantly teaching first aid and regulatory training, which requires face-to-face interaction, or at least did require face-to-face interaction before the limitations. So we just want to know, really, obviously, they're wanting to grow their business, they're wanting to expand, but because of the pandemic, they've had challenges in getting into organisations and actually delivering this. How would you, 3 of you, I'm going to start with Damien first of all, perhaps you could talk about some of that IT challenges in terms of their infrastructures. How would you see them having to move forwards?
Okay, so working on the basis that they're going to have to deliver things remotely, they need an appropriate service that's going to do that. it needs to be a service that's readily available by all people, rather than going off and getting something cheap, something that's proven. Perhaps Zoom, for example, not that it's sponsored or anything. You don't want it failing halfway through a session. It's got to be easy to access. I think there's going to be skills from those people doing the courses. I think they've got some presentation skills, maybe other skills. So while their business is currently aimed at, first aid training, I think there's other areas they could maybe go down of, maybe they're just used to doing the annual health and safety, I can't remember, first responder test. And I think there's some, let's call them, well, I think they actually are called dummies, but some dummies, maybe a one-on-one remote session rather than a group session with that dummy. And having seen what goes on those, I don't think a remote one-on-one would be that bad. It would just mean they would really have to roll the sleeves up. But maybe that focus and the one-on-one rather than the one-to-many may work really well for them.
Yep, good suggestions. Chris?
Well, I'll go with some more off-the-cuff, innovative ideas, perhaps. You'd need to think about how you sort of competently demonstrate that you are sort of doing this health and safety training. But and it'd be also interesting to look at the staff in the company, the 3 staff, and kind of ask them and maybe do some work with the customers. But, how about a daily challenge that you can send out to the people that you're training, a sort of fictitious emergency that pops into your inbox, a first aid related scenario, It's an emergency, respond within the next half an hour, how are you going to deal with this person that's sawn through their arm or whatever it is, and then form that into some kind of assessment, maybe gamify it a little bit, give awards, badges, link that to a website so that you can build up your competency in a kind of new or different way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Colin, have you got any suggestions?
I'd probably look at, because obviously first aid training is quite hands-on, so actually having a kit that they send out to the participants, because obviously when you're doing it, using triangular bandages to make slings and looking at things like that, actually, having those packaged up in a slightly different way as tasks and then sending that out to the participants so that they can actually still engage and you can see them what the end result is, and you're probably familiar with it, where it goes wrong, and doing it to encourage that interactivity. Because I think, as Chris said before, you get that challenge where people turn their camera off, they'll try and do other things in the background, but if they've got to have the camera on because they've got to demonstrate them tying a bandage or preparing something, then trying to keep that dialogue open, I think, will be a good way forward.
Yep. Really good suggestions there. So we've got another company here to talk about.
Yeah, I love it.
Right, so this one is a hardware store, independent hardware store. It's been going for 3 generations, over 50 years. Lots of expertise in-house. However, a large DIY change store, has opened up in the town. They are looking, obviously, to compete against that very large chain, but also potentially to, to just stay alive, exist. So not necessarily growth here, but we're just talking about survival. Chris?
Yeah, I think that's a really good opportunity. There's some evidence that sort of local high street is really growing, kind of post-COVID. So I think that's an opportunity. I think the worst thing you could do is sort of just move your hardware stock online and try and compete, because the retailers are going to have cheaper prices on online options. I'd be wanting to sort of lean into the value add that you can do because you're local and because you're a bit smaller. So, ideas might be kind of workshops on how to do specific sort of DIY tasks where you can also sort of cross-promote products, or maybe thinking about a personal service where in someone's home, if they've got a DIY challenge, you can talk them through how to do it, how to stick a skirting board to the wall or perform some basic task. That's the stuff that the big chains are certainly not doing yet, and they're probably not going to be able to do as quick as the local store. And it'd be things like that.
Colin?
I was going to say something similar. My first thought was they should do a vlog. They've got all that experience. One of the things that's really good about local stores, especially when you've got that sort of generational expertise, is that people will often go in and ask about how to solve a problem, and then while they're there, they buy that equipment. So I think, if they've probably over the years amassed a huge amount of knowledge about sort of common challenges that get faced, the frequently asked questions that they do, and then coming up with some form of online solutions for those which promote the business, promote if they have, obviously moved to some online trading, and puts that out, and maybe doing a sort of you need to replace a washer kit so it has washers and the right spanners and that kind of thing, because I'm absolutely rubbish at DIY, and my first point of call for any task is always to YouTube. And it's those sorts of things that if you're doing it as a local business and it makes it really accessible because people already know you and trust you, then build on the assets that you have and just move those into a digital format.
Yeah, characters maybe as well. I remember, was it Handy Andy? I'm showing my age a little bit there on the DIY SOS type programs.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone loved Handy Andy. Is there characters in that store that people know and go to? I mean, that's what you love about going to a local store. You actually meet people that you can get on with and chat with. Perhaps there's a superstar in the making for a YouTube channel or something.
So I guess one of the things that for this organisation, and apologies, I'm making some assumptions here, but perhaps they're not as technologically savvy, so going online could be quite daunting for them, going and doing that kind of thing. So I don't know, Damien, have you got any sort of top tips for businesses who are pivoting for the first time going online?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of out-the-box, really easy platforms. I think even something simple as a Facebook page initially, have it as a group. My thoughts are maybe whatever the DIY shop is, ask Dad, because I think, as Colin pointed out, not everyone's brilliant at DIY. Everyone goes to the Dad, how do I do this? And I think throwing that onto just a social media, someone is going to come back and say, you know what, I did this last week. I'm going to help you out. Oh, you might need these tools. And I think as people need tools, they're going to naturally go to the shop. And I think the shop will be able to throw advice in. And I think then the company will know, rather than completely focusing on one way to get online, that will shape and bring in that agility that they need to know of what direction they need to go online. Is it going to be an online sales? Is it going to be video? Is it going to be step-by-step guides, taking on YouTube and taking over the world with Ask Dad? That's kind of how I would go about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So really good suggestions. I guess the masterclasses that you've just described, I think they're a really good idea, aren't they? Is there any other ways of them working with the large stores? You know, they're I guess they're competitors, but is there a way of working with them? I don't know.
That's a radical idea. Working with competitors.
I know,
never
right?
thought of that. Ooh. Now you've stumped me on that.
Okay, there we go.
I'll feel that elsewhere. I never work with my competitors. No.
Well, I think there is a way, because the local company is going to know what the local demands are. And I think for a shop, I think there's always different demands on different areas because of, different, some people, and I know it's not going to work exactly like this, but some areas of the world build houses out of wood, some brick. And I think they will have that local knowledge, and maybe they can talk to the bigger company who gets the cheaper prices and agree do they buy their stock through them, but they're allowed to mark it up a little bit maybe, and they bring in their stock to that. They save a little bit of money, and at the same time help out the bigger company. Maybe I don't know how, because they're going to have consultants all over the world, but there's got to be, just sit down at a table, have a coffee, something will happen. If it's worth the chat and the opportunity.
That's really good. That's really, really great. Excuse me, I've got another company here. We've got two more actually that are lined up, so I'll go with the first one. So this is an independent travel agent wanting to expand their service and also to personalise their experiences. So obviously, I'm sure that everyone's acutely aware that travel agents have suffered somewhat in the last 12 to 18 months. Have you got any suggestions for travel agents having to personalise and expand?
Yeah.
Go on. Yeah, Damien, go for it.
So what I was going to say is people are really struggling to get out. And I know one of my work colleagues has done this. He's had a holiday at home and they've literally decorated different areas of the house and moved around. And I think you could easily market some kits of let's make the kitchen Spain, let's make this, that, and have a tour of the world in a weekend. And have maybe some drinks for the same area, some costumes, and I think that would just be like great fun.
Yeah,
great. I love that. Guess what I'm doing this weekend? We're going to Mexico.
Iceland.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. I think to me as well, there's been sort of a huge shift in staycationing this year, and it's not that accessible. in some senses. So a lot of popular holiday cottages, especially during school holidays, are sort of massively booked up, and the cost of actually getting into camping, although once you have it, is actually quite low. It's having that sort of package around. Can you sort of facilitate people to staycation effectively? Can you move into working with the local camping supplier to get a discount on packages? Or as Chris said, if you've got different tailored experiences, that sort of pop-up outside cinema for home, because you can get all sorts of inflatable screens and marquees and projectors that are battery operated, so you have to worry about ridiculous extension leads and those sorts of things. Can you then offer bespoke packages around certain experiences that enable people to take on something different? Or, if you're doing the ultimate one, I suppose, renting out VR headsets to give people the experience of being away, but without actually going anywhere at all.
Yeah, great idea. You got anything to add to that, Chris?
No, I think there's the common theme here is finding something where you can offer some real value or something that's unique and special to you, and then finding ways to amplify it. But I just love all of those ideas. I can see a kind of holiday at home supported by maybe some packs. You get a pack with your Mexican hat and your dips and your
yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it.
Okay, got another business here. So this business is a non-profit social enterprise. They deliver community and workplace mediation and grassroots projects, it says. They pivoted their work to be online within 6 weeks of COVID and have successfully delivered mediation by Zoom and conference calls and designing the training. It says here that they are, obviously they're limited in terms of their reserves and there's a barrier to increasing their staffing in terms of resourcing. They want to obviously keep training and doing this activity. Has anyone got any suggestions of how that company can expand without having staff? Colin, are there any opportunities for, I'm just thinking about more like if this is is there any research perhaps that kind of sits behind some of these companies? I mean, I don't actually know enough about this company to say anything, but is there anything that the university can offer in terms of support packages and things like that?
Potentially. I think one of the important things with any situation like that where it is quite complicated, because I was thinking, if people are requiring mediation services, yet they're also digitally poor, how can they get online to do the mediation in the first place? And I think it's quite important to sort of look at the fundamentals of where your business is going and understanding your marketplace so you can actually then tailor your solutions to meet the market requirements. One of the great things about working at universities is it's full of people who have great ideas. I wouldn't say I'm one of the people having great ideas, but my job's to know all the people having great ideas. So I always think it's, when I first started here, one of my colleagues said to me, there's no such thing as a stupid question, because no one knows the answers to everything. That's the foundation of a university, really. There's a whole bunch of questions that are out there that people don't have time to look at, but it's a university's business to find those questions and spend time looking at them. So, I'd certainly reach out to members of the project team, people like myself, and just ask the question. One of the things that we can do is utilise in-curricular activity. So there's student projects and placements and group projects where you might be able to generate some business intelligence. There's utilisation of these fully funded programmes where you can get additional guidance and support in a specific area. But ultimately, I think it's a good opportunity to reach out and ask a question, because the worst thing we can ever say is no. Outside of that, we're actually keen to try and help people. So if you ask us a question, if it's a no, we might suggest other places that you can go based on the information that you provide.
Yeah, that's great. Chris, have you got any suggestions for effectively online delivery?
I think reaching out, which is the theme that kind of Colin was alluding to. If you've got people in your organisation and you've got resource in your organisation, you can innovate in that way, then, happy days. If you haven't, then I think you can radically kind of look outside your organisation. So there's people like the university and other organisations you could come to for help. In the technology space, there's plenty of options. There's never been a better time to take businesses online. A lot of the things are cheap / free. Your 40 minutes free Zoom call is quite enough to do consultations with. That's not going to cost anything. Platforms like Facebook and the social platforms, they don't necessarily need to cost. and just kind of really leaving no stone unturned if you need to go outside. So, in the case that you said, is there equipment already in people's homes that you could look to use? Could you talk to existing providers of housing, council services, BT for the phone lines, broadband companies? We did a project with Vodafone providing data. We asked for kids at home in the lockdown that didn't have any data. We went to Vodafone and said, what's the chances of giving us a load of unlimited data SIMs? We thought they'd say no. They said yes. So I think just relentlessly keep going. And if you can't do it inside your organisation, just keep widening it out until you get there.
Yeah. Damien, have you got anything to add to that? So I guess there's, again, some... Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think very similar to Chris. I think if you don't ask, you need to just keep asking. And if you want a service, there's always going to be someone who's got it, who can provide it, whether it's a bit of sponsorship and you get it at a massively reduced cost. Microsoft offer charity licenses for their 365 services, effectively giving you almost free email and Teams calls on a really robust platform. And I think the more people you speak with, if you happen to just accidentally go to the university one day and have all your questions out of what services, what you think you might need, I think you'll bump into someone down the corridor, possibly Colin, who can at least point you in the direction of, yeah, you need to go to that room, go speak with Dave. He knows all about that. He'll be able to help you out. And yeah, you'll reach someone who's got or experienced it before.
Within your own organisation then, Damien, obviously you work with SMEs quite a lot, don't you, to help them support their IT infrastructure. What are the most typical, issues, problems, challenges that people come to you with? What's the thing that is their barrier?
So usually the biggest barrier for most charities is, well, they've got all these things that are free, like the Microsoft stuff. It's hardware. So we've asked all our clients over the last 6 months of any old hardware, as slow as it is, please hand it so we can hand it over to a non-profit organisation. And that happens, and it's brilliant when you see it, because while the modern organisations want the super fast machines up here, the normal stuff just for email is great. And I think those donations, they're sat in people's cupboards in offices, and you just need to ask.
Yeah, that's great. Brilliant, that's great. So we've gone through 4 example companies there. That's brilliant. I think hopefully we've given some really good ideas and suggestions. We've got a bit of time left to have some bit of Q&A. So if anyone has any more questions that they'd like to ask, either about what we've been talking about just now, or perhaps what Chris was talking about earlier, feel free to message Mark directly. I've already had a couple I can see come through, so I will start with those. But as I say, please keep asking your questions. Colin, this is one for you. So if an organisation wanted to collaborate with the university and is looking for research student opportunities, what do they do first? Is it simply email you?
In a simple term, absolutely, that's absolutely fine. I think one of the challenges is there's sort of several different ways that you can interact. Where I touched on sort of in curricula before, with all the quite a lot of the courses in the different departments across the institution, there are often group work projects that people can engage with. One of the challenges you have is if you come to us at the wrong time of year with those, that opportunity is gone. So it's often worth, getting in touch quite early when you think you're looking for something, and then we can identify which is the best way to engage. So there's basically sort of a suite of activity going through undergraduate and through postgraduate and into the sort of the projects like Lancashire Cyber Foundry, where you can get different types of support. If it's quite advanced what you're looking for and you're looking at potentially Innovate UK funding, you can use the university as a partner on that project, and that can buy in expertise that you might not have in-house. So it's just a whole suite, and there's a number of us in our sort of business partnerships and engagement team that are able to sit down with you, try and understand where you are in your business and identify that sort of pathway through that variety of different engagement opportunities. But as I said before, there's no such thing as a stupid question, so just ask.
And I guess that's obviously SMEs are always quite stretched, aren't they, for their resource? And whenever a new or possible identification of an opportunity comes up, they might not have the resource to be able to research into that. And I guess that's where the university can come in to support. I know that's what Lancashire Cyber Foundry is able to do for them as well as
I'd sort of say, often you can treat universities as an outsourced R&D department. Because that's the name of our game is research, so we have the luxury of having people that are paid to sit around and think about things, and what they're looking for are really good questions from external organisations to help catalyse that process. So, as I say, just ask.
Yep. Do you want to add to that, Chris?
No, I say email Colin. That's a great first start.
That's what I do too. Damien, there's a specific question here for you. It says, talk about contingency planning for companies. They've transformed their business more onto a digital online focus, and they're worried about kind of the doomsday situation. So everything gets lost, everything happens. Is that something that your organisation offers?
Yes. So there's always, I said there's always backups. You should always have backups, and it's the way you go about those backups. It's like having a family album. I treat a business as a family album. You may well have that photo album downstairs in the living room, but what happens if the building burns down? Having a photocopy or a digital copy of all those photos in a safe upstairs does not help. You need to go give a copy of that album to someone else in the world, in another house, in a different location, and keep it safe. And the same goes for your digital media, whether it's a website, an e-commerce platform, your email. Take a copy of it on a regular basis, store it somewhere else, and make sure that that backup or that data can then be easily transformed back into a working environment for your business. Test it. Make sure that someone's followed that process and knows what they're doing, and don't just assume that it's going to work. Like our DIY case, and everyone knows you take a washing machine apart, you put another bit in, it'll just go together fine. It doesn't. Test it. Make sure it works, and we can help you do that.
That's great. Thank you. I've got a question for you, Chris. I hope you're ready for this.
I'm ready for any question.
This is, where do you see business and technology space in 5 years' time? So I think they're talking about post-COVID business opportunities. What do you see happening?
Well, good question. Can we ever see what's going to happen in 5 years' time? I mean, 5 years ago, we couldn't really imagine the world we've had in COVID. So that's the clarification there. The way I see things going is a lot more rapid movement to sort of cloud-based services, a lot more AI and smart technology, a lot more decisions being made automatically, a lot more of technology in the hands of people in the business rather than sort of specialists. So I think we're already seeing this a little bit. There's things like low code, which is a way where you can actually just, write what were complicated IT workflows in a much kind of simpler way. You can do it yourself. You can do some quite advanced things. You can throw things about the internet and process things and pay people and move products and things like that. That's, I think, going to grow an awful lot more. And I think, I said before, there's never been a better time to take things and to put things online. If you've got an idea, almost 100% of the time there's going to be a set of services for free or low cost that you can access, technology-wise in the cloud. So I think there's going to be a lot more of that. Maybe also the automation space is something that I see really growing as well. A few years ago, you talked to your smart speaker and it didn't really give you the right answer. It was horribly unreliable. Now it understands you all the time and it can do quite advanced things. So I think maybe in 5 years' time, will we see more traditional jobs being taken over by smart automation? I think we might do. That's a flavour of what I think we might get in 5 years. But I'm very prepared to be horribly wrong on that. Don't replay this video in 5 years' time.
Colin, do you?
I think quite a lot of it sort of similar to Chris, although where he said more cloud, I'd say more edge. There's a whole sort of research theme at the moment about cloud to edge, and that will enable more autonomy. So where the move is towards autonomous vehicles, the decision-making processes need to be much quicker. And one of the problems you get with the cloud at the moment, there's a lot of latency, and so that decision-making process isn't there. So there's a big move to sort of cloud to edge services. Given how everyone's moved to digital, I think there's going to be a massive growth in cybersecurity purely because everyone's now attacking more digital systems because they're now all online. So I think now's a good time to engage with the project because if you are making those changes and looking at it, you need to be much more aware of the types of vulnerabilities that there are. Again, with manufacturing, it's referred to as Industry 4 or the Industrial Internet of Things. The data collection that enables, but as you put those processes in, it opens up more vulnerabilities. So as one thing moves forward, you need to be mindful of what that unlocks and the other things that it engages with. So there's a massive shift towards this sort of interrelationship between all these sorts of distributed systems, and an overarching thing that we need to be much more aware of is the security of those. I think you've seen all the attacks in the States and the closure of the oil pipeline. In Ireland, they took down their equivalent of the health service. These are systems that you would think would be secure, and they obviously weren't. And I think people need to really start thinking about, as we move forward and we use more digital, are these systems safe? And when we integrate with them, does that create any vulnerabilities for our own organisations? Which I think goes back to Damien's point. You've got to have solutions, you've got to have effective backups, and you've got to be able to maintain your business should the worst happen, so that if you do get locked out of your own equipment, you've actually got the ability to spin it up again somewhere else and be able to be resilient in that way.
That's really good, and that's an excellent way to lead on to the end of this programme. So thank you very much for all your questions. Just then to recap, we are the Lancashire Cyber Foundry. We are there to help you, to support you. We have a programme of work that's available for you to access for all eligible SMEs across Lancashire. All inquiries to be made to it's called Lancashire Foundry at lancaster.ac.uk, but Mark will send you all of the details for that anyway. But we support companies in a whole variety of different ways. We've got workshops that you come and learn all about cybersecurity. We help you to think about your digital future, how you could innovate, but with security at the heart of it. So we design, it's secure by design, sorry. We then have got bespoke packages available for SMEs. These are technical processes and products that we can produce for you with our technical team to help you to progress that idea or solution that you've thought of. And of course, we're there to help you also to access academics and experts within the university. So please get in touch with us. We hope you found today's session really interesting. I know I have. I'd like to thank the panel. They've been brilliant. Thank you, Colin, Chris and Damien. And we hope to be in touch soon. Thanks very much. Bye.